of the essential role that statistics plays in development policy. And in fact, in the previous speaker spoke about the issue of the Millennium Development Goals. And many countries are struggling to meet those goals. Critically, a missing element is that they simply don't have the data to measure whether or not they have met those conditions, and it is an issue. In the region, for example, Jamaica is certainly advanced in comparison to other parts of the region, in terms of the collection and use of data. But it demonstrates that we are, as a region, struggling to play catch up other parts of the world in terms of the quality of data that you can access. Interestingly, from a company perspective, having spent a lot of time living in the US, it was always easy to get information on anything. You could buy it, it's always available. I could get data on your driver's license, where you live, everything, your zip code. I could then use that data and analyze and determine what product I do sell to you. In Jamaica, that's virgin territory. There's nothing. Every time you need that kind of data, you have to actually do a piece of research. Outside of what Statin collects, you have to literally go out and collect fresh data in order to solve those basic problems. And from a business perspective, that can be very costly. We have also, one of the things that the international community has been emphasizing in recent times, certainly in the last decade or so, probably more than that, but certainly urgent, it has become urgent in the last 6 years, is the need for a strategic plan framework to drive statistical systems in developing countries because of those perceived weaknesses. And we are seeing more and more the emergence of evidence-based policy. It is not yet widespread enough to have that impact, and it should be having, but at least you're seeing that process emerging, which is important. Of course, there are some challenges. In many countries, statistics really does not have the moral, political, or financial support it requires. And it varies by country. But it is recognized increasingly for its planning, decision-making, governance, and accountability and management roles. Of course, you sometimes run into problems when the data does not reflect precisely what the leadership of an organization they want to see, and that sometimes can get you into trouble. But it nonetheless it reflects the requirement and a need to move in that direction, because it does remove all the gray and the clouds that sometimes surrounds our discussion on how we are performing as a country. It's sometimes interesting to, and we have certainly had many discussions with companies and countries, where when you look at Jamaica's GDP data, it really does not match with what you see on the ground. I mean, it's a little bit difficult to try to figure out how does that GDP number translate what you're seeing on the ground. Now the question, and it raises other questions. Perhaps there are some things that we're not picking up, but it does raise some issues that we need to correct. Because it may suggest, for example, that if you are, let's say, there is a report done a few years ago on the size of the informal economy. And when one plans, you're not going to plan for the formal economy, you're going to plan for the formal economy. But if half your economy, your total economy is informal, and you're planning for one third of it, then you're going to be problems. Because it essentially means that whatever resource you put in or whatever plans you put in and implement will be defeated by the other elements that you have not fully captured. So it is an issue that we need to address as a matter of course, if we are going to begin to record more accurately what are the activities that are taking place and how do we actually structure policies to benefit the total total country, not just the official or formal sector. Now, I want to talk a little bit about ministry rather, based on, again, my experience and we would have been part of that early process. I think the first phase of the process really was on trying to understand the sector. In fact, I spent a lot of time just studying the last 40 years of Jamaica's agricultural performance. I guess being an academic does force you to do that. You can't really move forward as you understand what history has been. And that data showed some gave some very interesting insights. For example, you recognize that one of the issues in the sector is that we tend to move in spurts. We tend to grow in spurts and we fall back and we grow again. And when you had a number of international programs, you tend to have a lack of sustainability. So something comes in and there's a major program to increase production, and then after 2 or 3 years, we go right back to square one. Interestingly though, the data as it relates to employment in the sector has not really dipped by much over the last 40 years. I mean, 1968 it was around 240,000. It's right back there. When you compare Jamaica's employment in agriculture and you look at other countries, there's been a steady decline in the number of persons in directly related to agriculture and an increase in output from the sector. In our case, we have had a decline in output and an increase in employment, which does create some issues in the sector. We also spend a lot of time on planning and training. In fact, all the RADA extension officers were trained, every single one of them, in data collection to try to ensure consistency in how data was collected and to ensure that all persons were operating using the same methodologies. For example, it is not easy to estimate an acre of land. And the challenge that Jamaica faces is that we don't have a lot of flat land that you can simply go and estimate with some degree of accuracy. We have hillsides and valleys and there's a whole heap of complexities. So when an extension officer goes out and says, well, listen, we have 10 acres of cabbages, how do you ensure that 10 acres is actually 10 acres? And then, of course, the issue of how do you actually measure the output? And we found in that whole training session that some persons, different persons have different ways of measuring the thing. And see, what you're getting, the data you're getting, was not really consistent because of the different standards that were being used in different parishes to collect data. Interestingly, some people were pretty good at estimating an acre of land, but others were not so good, and an acre could be 2 acres or 3 acres. The same applies to our farmers. When a farmer tells that he has 3 acres of carrots, I mean, you oftentimes find that 3 acres is really half acre, quarter acre. Or he has 30,000 pounds of cabbages or whatever, and you check it out, it's probably 5. So there is an issue in terms of how we estimate and arrive at those kind of numbers. The second phase of the process has really been the production and application of the statistics, and also implement some of those plans. And interestingly, a lot of data we have collected actually comes from studying. And we use that information quite extensively to plot the plan to determine how we correct what you're seeing there, and you can see the data I was talking about. If you go back to 1968, it really is not that different. Importantly for us as well, we keep track of the value growth, and I show you on the slide to explain why we think that this is actually critical. In fact, I think, if I may say so, I think the ministry is at the point where this is becoming a critical focus, because I think our farmers have demonstrated that given the right conditions and the right support, they will produce. The issue is what do you do with the production when it's produced? And we find that I've come to the conclusion that it is impossible to tell 162,000 to Jamaica farmers what to produce. They will produce what they want to produce where they want to produce it. I think increasingly important is what do we do with that production, and how do we find ways of addressing that. Now, what do you recognize? This is some data showing value of agriculture exports over the last 4 years. As you can see, the only real area of positive is in the non-traditionals. The yams, vegetables, that kind of thing. But most of our major crops have been in serious demand. And what we have recognized that each of those crops, each crop, bananas, citrus, coffee, cocoa, have different problems. The problems are not similar. So every crop has to have a different strategy to grow it because of the special problems that those crops may be having. Cocoa, most farmers have abandoned their fields because of the lack of revenue generated from that. And we're beginning to see the same issues now with coffee. Interestingly, Jamaican coffee is the gold standard for coffee. And I've often asked myself the question, why are we not maximizing that fact, that reality? We're one of 8 fine-flavored cocoa producers in the world, but if you look at our cocoa production, it has been in sharp decline. But pimento is considered to be pretty good. So you recognize the challenge.